You're listening to the podcast for all of the news, notes, and breakdowns for your Ohio State Buckeyes. This is Sons of the Shoe with Nick Wilson and Spencer German.
Sons of the Shoe is back. Spencer German with you here on the show. I'm excited to be back with you as we get you ready for the start of Big Ten play for the Ohio State Buckeyes. They got Michigan State this weekend, a night game at Michigan State, first road game of the season as well, which will test some new things we haven't quite seen yet from the Buckeyes. But it should be a fun one, should be a fun show, should be a fun game. We're going to preview that coming up here in the second segment. We also have the return of the Michigan Panic Meter after they beat a ranked team last weekend. We'll talk about that and why I think we miscalculated the Big Ten expansion a little bit here. So we'll get into all those different things. But hi, how are you? How's it going, everybody? It's Spencer German with you. No Nick Wilson this week, unfortunately. He had a family matter to attend to, but he will be back with us on Saturday night as we recap whatever happens in the Michigan State game, and we're very much looking forward to that. In the meantime, I implore you to like, follow, subscribe, comment at the 92 Through the Fan YouTube channel. Whatever suits your fancy, whatever you want to do. We appreciate your support. And this show is only possible with your support each and every single week, each and every single episode. So you can find us in the Odyssey app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. But more specifically, make sure you go to Apple and find us there. And, of course, at the 92 Through the Fan YouTube channel, where you can watch the show if you want to look at our ugly mugs. And as I alluded to earlier, also comment and let us know your thoughts on certain things. And I did actually jump in the comments this week. I'm proud of myself. I commented on a couple things. Somebody said I had a terrible take about Will Howard, and I said, yeah, terrible takes are my thing. I'm trying to be more active in that way. I know Nick's great about it. I tried my best this week, and we'll try to keep that going. We'll try to keep that routine going forward. You got to set a bar for yourself. You got to set attainable goals for yourself. So as the season goes on, I want to be in the comments more and more, commenting and interacting with you guys, and I'm going to work on it. We're all, what's the quote that they say? We are all works in progress. That's what I'm doing. I'm a work in progress. I'm an imperfect project. I'm going to keep trying to be the best I can in terms of that. So anyway, guys, we appreciate your support as always. But along the lines of my comments on Will Howard, I actually found this. There was a quote from Ryan Day this week in his weekly press conference that I found relatable. I think him and I think similarly in this way. And so this is the card that I'm going to play in regards to my Will Howard take from last Saturday, which was that I thought he played fine. I thought he played good. He did what he had to do in the scope of the game and the offense, where obviously your run game was dominating and he wasn't asked to do a lot. My biggest thing is I still have questions going into Big Ten play here about him throwing the ball downfield, and I haven't had to see him do too much yet. So I'm just I'm a little unnerved about, like, okay, what's it going to look like when things get tight with him at quarterback? That's the thing that I think I still need to see, which is why I'm walking away from these first three games like, okay, like I thought he was fine. I didn't think he was like amazing. I thought he was good. I thought he was fine is the wrong word. I thought he was good. I didn't think it was amazing. He had the benefit of obviously having the immense talent he does around him, which could be the story all year. Maybe he doesn't need to be amazing because of that exact thing. But I just, I'm still a little bit uncomfortable just about like what he is what he's going to look like in some of those tighter moments. And I don't know that we have the full picture on him yet. And that's okay. But I do think moving forward, we want to figure that out still. And as we get into Big Ten play, hopefully we will. But along those lines, Ryan Day was asked a question in his weekly press conference this week about the run game and if he feels good about the progress that they made, obviously, this past weekend against Marshall. And I thought his answer was pretty interesting because this is kind of how this is where my Will Howard take from the weekend was basically birthed. Like this idea that you can't be satisfied. Here's what he had to say.
Yeah, I don't feel good about anything. That's just my mindset. Yeah, I mean, I don't. That has to be everybody's mindset. You start to feel good about something, and complacency can sneak up on you fast. So nobody feels good about anything. I think we're building confidence in it, though. I think guys are starting to, okay, we can get after some people now, and they're starting to have a little bit of fun and say, like, I'm going to line up against you and get after you. And I think, to me, in the way the running backs are running, and that you can feel that's palatable when you're out there, and so we got to keep building on that. Again, bigger challenges are ahead and all that, but that part has been encouraging, I would say.
So the idea that he doesn't feel good about anything, I think is pretty poignant and speaks to the inner workings of Ryan Day's mind. Now, there's another angle of this I want to take, but that is the exact place that a take like mine on Will Howard comes from. It's this idea that I know what the expectation is at Ohio State. Clearly, Ryan Day does too. By the way, that video and audio, courtesy of 11 Warriors. So thanks to our friends at 11 Warriors for that. I clipped it from there. But anyway, it's the same sort of mindset. Like I am obsessed with this team that has talked about winning a national championship, has the talent to win a national championship, getting to that level. And so, yeah, I set this standard of like, I need it to look a certain way for me to feel like that is attainable. Have they looked that yet? To an extent, yes, because they've played teams that are inferior to them. But on other fronts, there's still some things we're waiting to see. I think we're still waiting to see more from Will Howard, as I said. I think we're still waiting to see more from the offensive line. And Nick and I have talked about that a ton on the show, about the idea that the offensive line is still sort of coming along and figuring some things out. I didn't think Josh Fryer had a very good game on Saturday against Marshall. He had some costly mistakes and errors at certain points in that game. And I think there's still some growth to be had on that front. I did think the left side of the offensive line with Donovan Jackson back and Josh Simmons, that side I think is better, and they seem to be playing up to par. But you're still waiting on some things up front, I think, overall. So yeah, like there are still some questions we have about this team, and that's okay to have them. But that is where like it's the same mindset that Ryan Day's kind of exemplifying there. This idea of like, I am so obsessed with perfection that I'm not satisfied with anything. I don't feel good about anything that we've seen at this point. And being able to like that to me is almost like a championship level mindset. It's probably similar to how Nick Saban would think, right? Like Nick Saban will come out and talk about how they gave up too many rushing yards to Old Dominion or something like that. And what was this, the shit through a tin horn quote that he dropped that one time. Like that's the type of stuff that makes you great. And so I can appreciate that from Ryan Day. But I also do wonder, because here's the other side of these comments from Ryan Day. I used to hear stories because obviously, I wasn't around during the peak of Lou Holtz coaching prowess when he was obviously at Notre Dame and leading Notre Dame from the mid 80s to the mid 90s to prominence and national title contenders and all these different things. I wasn't there for that. I wasn't alive. Well, I was alive for the end portion of that. I was born in 91. I wasn't around to watch that. But part of the reason my dad, who helped me become the college football fan that I am, part of the reason that he hated Notre Dame was that Lou Holtz's teams would like blow a team out by like 50 points. And then he'd come out and talk about how terrible they played. And it bugged him that he would do that. And so I growing up, I kind of understood where he was coming from. But now as I've gotten older, I understand, like, I think that's just part of like that championship mindset. Like Lou Holtz did that. And then I have my own thoughts on Lou Holtz anyway, especially after the Ryan Day comments last year. But I don't know that it's as annoying as I thought it was back then when I was hearing stories secondhand about it versus now where it's like, that's just what to be a great coach and to have a championship caliber team and live up to that expectation, you hold your players to a higher standard. I think that's what Ryan Day's kind of getting at here, is this idea that he's holding his team to a higher standard and that he's not satisfied with anything right now, because you can't ever be satisfied in that job if you want to achieve greatness, if you want to achieve the heights and the plateaus and the accolades that this team thinks they can achieve. Like they want to talk championship. Well, they got to live that championship mentality. And I think that's what Ryan Day's trying to do there. So I can respect that. But I do wonder if there's anybody that feels this has a negative effect or has the alternate, it's the alternate sort of idea here with Ryan Day. And what I mean by that is if people feel like it's an obsession, and if it stems from the whole, like, he's lost to Michigan 3 straight years and he hasn't achieved the national championship national championship success that obviously his predecessor in Urban Meyer did, and he's trying to fill those shoes and prove that he's worthy of this job, and he hasn't quite gotten there yet. So is he so obsessed that with this idea of greatness and this idea of, what's going to what if he's going to get there and if he's going to beat Michigan, like that it's almost negative if it's a bad thing for him. Like he's too obsessed with perfection. I don't see it that way, but I do wonder if there's Ohio State fans out there that do see it that way, because on some level, I think people at this point are looking at everything Ryan Day says in a microscope, and they're like, oh man, he's losing it. And I do think he looks like a guy after those Michigan games the last 3 years that has lost sleep trying to figure out how to finally beat them so that he can get that monkey off his back and people can stop saying he can't do it, and that he can prove he's the coach and quiet down the chatter about getting fired and how it's time to move on. Now he's John Cooper 2.0 and he's just not good enough, all these different things. Like, is the obsession getting to him? Is that what do people interpret that quote as the obsession getting to him? I don't. Because like I said, as I've gotten older, I've realized like that's the mindset of great coaches. And like I said, I think we heard that from Urban Meyer. I think we heard that from Nick Saban. I think we heard similar things from Urban Meyer in terms of like being better, and he certainly preached those types of things to his players every single day. And I think that's the same thing Ryan Day's kind of doing here. But I can understand where there's people out there who think Ryan Day at this point is maybe too far gone, and that beating Michigan has become such an obsession for him. And the idea of like living up to this coach that was before him in this championship level that he's expected to fulfill every year at Ohio State, because that's the expectations and the standard there, that it gets to him and he's cracking. And when you see 3 games against inferior opponents and you blow him out and he's sitting there saying like he doesn't feel good about anything, if people are using that as a negative against him. I'm not. I think this is Ryan Day walking the walk and talking the talk, but I also understand where some people think that that's very fraudulent from him. And so I want to know where your guys' heads are at with this. You can jump in the 92 Through the Fan YouTube channel comment section. Do you think Ryan Day is too obsessed with perfection, that it's a detriment against him, and that it's the latest reason why he can't get past Michigan, because he's too obsessed and he's letting it get to him and he's cracking? I think we've seen enough from Ryan Day over the last since the last season ended in January in that disastrous Peach Bowl. Was it the Peach Bowl? I always forget if it was the Peach Bowl or if it was I don't even know. Cotton Bowl? Cotton Bowl. It was the Cotton Bowl. I think I always confuse the Peach Bowl and the Cotton Bowl. I don't know how. Those are 2 very different things. Peaches and cotton. Not really related at all, other than the fact that they grow on plants, but they're very different types of plants that they grow on. But for some reason, I messed those ones up. But no, I think he's proven over the last year or so that he's changed in the way that he's kind of going about things. He brought in a new person to call plays. He has taken on that CEO role. He has embraced NIL to a T. He got people to help fund things, and they went out and they added a whole bunch of talent at a bunch of different positions to make this team better. But I get that there's still doubts there from a lot of people who just feel like he's cracking. He's too obsessed. He's got his, he doesn't get the rivalry and all these different things, and he's never going to win until he gets the rivalry. Maybe that's all true. But I just think, like, I don't view it as a negative from him that he doesn't feel satisfied with anything. I think that's what it takes to get your team to that level if they're going to be a national to me, the point of a coach has always been to kind of check egos at the door. There's going to be guys who come in feeling good about themselves after a good performance, or the team might be undefeated and they're like, oh man, we're really rolling. Nothing's going to stop us. And it's one thing for the players to say, like, we know we have to deliver. We can't just walk. We can't just say it. But I think the coach's role is to like provide that checks and the checks and balances. Be the guy who's like, no, we're not good enough yet. We got to be better. And I think that's what Ryan Day's doing here. And I can appreciate that, because I was the guy who also said I thought that I still need to see more from Will Howard after this 3-game stretch and after the game against Marshall over the weekend when he had a 75 completion percentage. I get it. It's ridiculous. But that's that, again, when the standard at Ohio State is championships, especially this year with the talent that they have. I'm in line with Ryan Day. I don't know that I feel good about a ton of things right now. I think there's a lot of reason to keep pushing the envelope for them to be better and continue pursuing perfection. so that they can get to that they can think like a champion. And hopefully as the schedule gets tougher, they're getting better, they're building, they're growing, and that culminates in a deep playoff run. And obviously, ideally, hope a national championship. Where do you stand? Is Ryan Day too obsessed with perfection that he needs to just take a step back and appreciate that his team is playing good football? Or do you think this is the heart, or do you think this is the mark, rather, of a championship caliber coach trying to push his team to be even better than they have through these first 3 games? Let's take a break and hear from our sponsors. When we get back, though, guys, Big Ten play starts now. Michigan State on the road under the lights, the challenges of that, what Ohio State can expect, and what is the thing that you want to see the most from this Ohio State Buckeyes team in that game. We'll talk about all that and more coming up on Sons of the Shoe. Welcome back in, Sons of the Shoe. Spencer Sherman with you, and we're getting you ready for the start of Big Ten play for the Ohio State Buckeyes this weekend. They're 3-0, but this is where the things really get tough. We know what Big Ten football is all about. We know what the style of play is, and we actually will talk about that a little bit more in the final segment, where I resurrect the Michigan Panic Meter this week, and of course get into 4-down territory, where there is a lot going on in this NIL era that we have to talk about. So we'll get into all those things coming up, but Big Ten play is always known for being physical. Like, this is a different beast than just like out talenting everybody. There's challenges that come with this. Now, I'm not saying that's going to necessarily happen against Michigan State, but I do think there's a different level of preparedness that teams need as they start Big Ten play than when you're just starting the season against like a Marshall and a Western Michigan and an Akron, of course. Even though Michigan State is probably, I don't want to say are they bottom tier in the Big Ten? They're not very good right now, but they're a team that always that has a solid history that they can fall back on. And I think that they are going to present some challenges in terms of just how they play the Buckeyes and some of the things that they offer. But I also just think that's kind of the style of Big Ten play. Like, these programs know each other so well. They kind of know what they're getting into every time they play. They know Ohio State has a ton of talent, but they also think of ways and recruit for ways to try to sort of slow those things down. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I do think Michigan State is an interesting matchup for the Buckeyes as they go on the road for the first time, and there are some challenges that come with that as well. You're not in the friendly confines of the shoe, and I think it sort of sets the stage for some other road games coming up that we know are obviously going to be tough for Ohio State. Most notably the Oregon game, which is going to be here before we know it, because we're basically 3 weekends out. And that's going to be a fun one for sure. But before we get there, Michigan State comes to the table as a team. I think Michigan State is interesting because they have played some solid football this year. And I think maybe most notably that game, the matchup with Maryland that they had a couple weeks back, where they pushed Maryland sort of to the brink and then win it at the end of regulation the way that they did. I mean, that was a fun game a couple weeks ago. And I actually thought that was kind of like a battle of wits for them, like a game of growth for a young team that is obviously in rebuild and trying to kind of get back to prominence. I thought it showed a lot of growth from them 2 weeks ago that they were able to, or I guess 3 weeks ago, that they were able to kind of pull that one out against a tough Big Ten opponent that, was giving you a run. They haven't had like the most electric offense other than when they played Prairie View back on September 14th. So that was a week ago, or a little over, or 2 weeks ago, I guess, when they scored. They beat them 40-0. But of course, you expect that from playing a FCS team. And then this past weekend, you get a tough Boston College team, which, as we know, Bill O'Brien, he's going to get his teams very, very much prepared. And the guy who was going to be working on the Ohio State staff, of course. And they get outlasted just barely 23-19, but they put up some fight in that one. And that's the thing I think I want to highlight the most from this Michigan State team is like they're not just like a roll over and die style team. And I don't know that that's true for the Big Ten anyway. I think most teams in the Big Ten are going to play you pretty tough, but they are definitely going to give you like a fight And it's not just going to be this like boat race, I don't think, out of like immediately. I think it's going to take Ohio State a little bit to get going, and then they'll be able to pull away because they are the more talented team. But I think Michigan State's gonna push you and give you some things. Starting on the offensive side for them, I think Aiden Childs is a fun player to watch. Dual threat guy. He doesn't have the highest completion percentage. He is turnover prone, which is something I want to get into because I do want to ask you guys at the 92 to the Fan YouTube channel in the comment section or on Twitter. You can hit me up at Spencito_. What is the thing that you want to see most from this Ohio State team against Michigan State this weekend? I'll give you an answer here coming up. But Childs has 7 interceptions versus 4 touchdowns thrown. He also has 135 yards on the ground and 3 rushing touchdowns. So that makes him a threat. It's sort of as a dual threat as in multiple facets. And that is still a thing that I think matters for Ohio State because, I think this past weekend you saw Stone Earl when he was still in the game for Marshall. He had some success as kind of a dual threat guy. And he was playing maybe the game of his life passing wise before he exited that game with the injury and was able to sort of make some nice plays and do some things downfield. And if Childs can kind of get comfortable and do that, I wonder if he can start to put together a nice game on top of being a dual threat guy that poses some different challenges than just standard quarterbacks. And I think Ohio State has struggled with dual threat quarterbacks over the years. So I'm curious to see how they handle him, but he is a fun quarterback to watch. And I do think he sort of provides this future of the position for Michigan State. Well, he's a grad transfer, so I guess maybe not so much. But I do think like there's something to be said for him sort of bringing some stability to that position and allowing and showing sort of like how it's supposed to be played, how it's supposed to be done for that team. Sorry, I misspoke. He's a sophomore transfer, not a grad transfer. That was my bad. But yeah, I because of that, I do think he provides sort of like an outlook for the future of this program, some stability at the quarterback position, which by the way, like they have a ton of all their quarterbacks are basically new this year. It's transfers or freshman players that are in their first year with the program. And so like they have this kind of they changed a lot over at that position and they're trying to lay a foundation. I think Childs kind of provides that as the leader of that group. And I think he's going to continue to get better and better the more he plays. Rushing wise, Nate Carter and K'Ron Lynch-Adams are the two top guys. They both have a little over or under or around 250 yards rushing. But I think their offense certainly flows more so through their passing game and what they're able to kind of do from a standpoint of throwing the football and being able to move the football that way. They have a couple of receivers who can put up some numbers. I think, Nick Marsh is one of them. He's got 232 yards receiving and a touchdown. Montori Foster has 200 yards and a touchdown, 159 yards for Jack Velling, 131 yards from Isaiah Johnson. And I do think that goes to show you, like, Childs spreads the ball around. On top of being dual threat and doing a lot himself, he can get a lot of different players involved. And so you get a level up in talent with this Michigan State team than what you've seen so far. And it's I don't want to say it's like a test, but it is a little bit more of a challenge for this Ohio State secondary that's calling themselves the best in America to, put their, get their defenses up, play some good football, and slow down a familiar opponent in Michigan State to sort of set yourself up to have success out there and show us what this group really can do. On the defensive side, cornerback Charles Brantley is a guy to keep an eye on. He has 2 interceptions this year as the left side cornerback of this Michigan State team. And so he's kind of a threat that can bait you into some throws and make some really good plays that way. I'm curious about him. Also, linebacker Jordan Turner and defensive lineman Chris Bogle have 3 sacks each this year. And so there's some blitz threats, some upfront threats. What's interesting about Michigan State this year is that they have basically they welcomed in 9 new guys into their front 7 rotation, because they are rotating a lot of these guys. But if you look at their depth chart and you watch some of the tape, like, they have 3 guys really two guys that are in the front seven, in Daquan Dowse and Jordan Turner, the linebacker that I just alluded to, who are transfers, but behind them, like up on the defensive line, there are a number of other players. Wayne Matthews the third, who I think is a pretty solid rotational guy for them. I think, he is a tackling machine. He's kind of like he's good in the run and stopping the run. So they have a good rotation of guys, a lot of new faces, but all guys that can certainly contribute to make some plays in that front seven. And that's, I think, where Ohio State has to worry the most as an offense, is just with that front seven and some of the playmakers that they have. Now you're thinking talent-wise, like Ohio State has the edge. You're hoping they can expose this group a little bit with obviously Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson and be able to establish the run. But I think this group brings some resistance to the table, and it'll be interesting to see. Now, a couple of things I just wrote down. Defense is just 39% on third down, which is near it's not a great number by college football standards or rankings right now in terms of what they're giving up on third down. So, place where Ohio State can be better, I think, too. Granted, they didn't have a lot of third down opportunities last week, so I can't really put that all on them. But a chance to sort of have some success there. They are allowing 96 yards in the ground, which is 29th in college football. And that's kind of the thing I want to, that's where I bring up the front seven and how solid that group has been. That is a place where this is a game for Ohio State to really test. Again, we played you the comments from Ryan Day talking about if he was satisfied or felt good about the run game and the momentum they built from Marshall. That number, that figure in relation to the ground game and Michigan State being a team that stopped the run to this point, just 96 yards per game. That's something I want Ohio State to focus on and see if they can buck that trend, or if Michigan State's going to sort of prove like, okay, we're going to slow this down. What are you going to do? And then I think that adds some stakes to Will Howard and what he's able to do, and if he's able to kind of navigate that as from an offensive standpoint and at the quarterback position. So some interesting numbers, some interesting figures, but that front seven, I think, is something to keep an eye on for Michigan State. They're a tough group. They have a lot of new faces, a lot of veteran faces that have transferred in and come over, to help contribute here. And so those guys are all going to be a factor, I think, rotating in throughout this game for the Spartans. In terms of the question I asked, and I'll pose it to you again. What is the thing that you're most looking for out of the Buckeyes this week as they start Big Ten play? And if you're going to go run game, because I just brought that up, like the 96 yards per game allowed by Michigan State, and you want to see how they combat a good front seven, a team that's shown they can stop the run a little bit, fine, I get it. My answer, though, turnovers. I want to see Ohio State create some more turnovers than they have. They have just 3 so far, 3 turnovers in 3 games. And again, from a secondary that's calling themselves the best in America, I want to see them get Aiden Childs in some tough spots. And that starts up front too. I want the pressure to be there, get him uncomfortable, and then he's making some mistakes, throwing the ball downfield, or he's getting baited into some throws. I want to see the secondary come away with a couple picks, make some plays, set up the offense with a short field, maybe score a touchdown on a pick 6 type play. That's always something too. I think early in the season, I'm expecting a lot more turnovers from an Ohio State defense against inferior opponents. Last couple of years, it just hasn't been there. And that worries me because those things, in the margins when you're playing a better team on a national championship run or otherwise, those are the things that can flip a game immensely for you. And I get that they're sometimes few and far between against certain opponents. But if you can't do it against these teams, when are you going to do it? So I want to see if this defense can create some more turnovers, if the secondary can snag a few interceptions. And that's one of the big things I'm looking for, because Childs is a guy, like I said, that is interception prone. He's known to make some mistakes here or there. And I want to see if Ohio State can sort of force him into some of their own. What are you most looking for out of the Ohio State Buckeyes this weekend as they start Big Ten play against the Michigan State Spartans? Answer that question in the 92 to the Fan YouTube comments, or on Twitter, you can hit me up at @SpenC2_. Final segment coming up next. Michigan Panic Meter returns, and a byproduct of the NIL era, players just deciding to up and quit mid-season because they got other things on the table. We'll talk about that coming up here on Sons of the Shoe. Welcome back in, Sons of the Shoe. I almost said the Sioux, which is a different podcast. Sounds like something that would be a name for an Arkansas podcast. Michigan Panic Meter. It is back. They just beat a ranked team this weekend. They upset USC, who was number 11 in the country at the time. Michigan was, I think, 18th, and they now jump up to 12th as USC falls to 13th after this past weekend, after the upset win. And they did it with Alex Orji throwing for just 32 yards in the entire game. How about that? They make a quarterback change, and that quarterback just runs you to victory. But I want to talk more about that game specifically here in a second. But before I go there, I do need to get to the Michigan Panic Meter because I know what you guys are thinking. I know what Nick is probably thinking, even though he's not here for this episode. He's probably thinking, oh, Spencer, he's panicking because Michigan won a game against a ranked team. He's going to move his panic meter. I know Spencer too well. He's Mr. Panic over here. Well, guess what, Nick? Eat shit. No. Michigan Panic Meter for me, staying in the dark gray. It's staying in the dark gray. I am not worried about Michigan at all. They upset USC. I think there's reasons for that. But listen, we know if you're going to throw for 32 yards, I understand that there's the whole stat about the team that's won the run battle in the last 10 matchups or whatever for Ohio State, Michigan. That's the team that wins the game. But listen, Ohio State, or Michigan rather, is not going to beat Ohio State come November if all they can do is run the ball and you got Alex Orji throwing for like 50 yards. It's just not going to happen. There's no chance in hell that that's going to work. They beat them last year in the margins because they had a better run game and a better offensive line, but also because J.J. McCarthy made some super impressive throws. Alex Orji ain't that guy. So I'm not worried about Michigan just because they beat USC. And I'll tell you this. I think the reason Michigan beats USC is because I think we collectively, and I do think some of this is it's not all. I think Nick and I have talked about it a little bit. I think it's more so outside, like other Big Ten fans and whatnot. I think, and really just USC and Oregon fans and fans of the Pac-12 who are like, oh, that's going to be fun to watch. I think there's like an outsider perspective that the adjustment for the Big Ten was going to be, well, how are they going to adjust these high-flying offenses like Oregon and USC? I think it's the opposite. I think that we underestimated what it was going to take for Oregon and USC to adjust to Big Ten football. And the reason I say that is because this is just a different brand of football, man. Like, you can't show up to the Big Ten and not have a solid defense. You just can't. And I think USC saw that week one. Like, they're known for their offense. That's Lincoln Riley's thing. But you get a tough defense, and that's the one thing I'll give Michigan credit for. Like, they still have a solid defense with some returners that came back this year. That group is good. And so they sort of ran into not a buzzsaw, but they ran into a team that was better defensively, slowed them down, and was able to get out of there and sort of muck a game up, ugly a game up. It was very Pittsburgh Steelers-esque, and you win the game that way. And I think Oregon could run into the same thing. They start Big Ten play this weekend too, but it's against UCLA, a former Pac-12 team. So their real tests will start coming Michigan State the week after that, October 4th. And then, of course, Ohio State, October 12th. And then they get into the thick of their Big Ten schedule. They play Michigan later as well. November 2nd, they play them. So I'm curious to see what that adjustment continues to be like for those teams, because I don't think it's going to be as easy as you just walk into the Big Ten with a high-flying offense and it's all rainbows and butterflies and you're just putting up massive numbers. I just don't think it's going to happen. So that was the takeaway I had from that game, and I'm not worried about Michigan. So I don't care what Nick has to say or what he thinks about me and my panickiness. Not today. Not today, Nick. All right, 4-down territory to get us out of here. And we start on first down with maybe the most fascinating topic running right now in college football. UNLV quarterback Matthew Sluka leaving the program. He transferred it from Holy Cross this offseason, and he's sitting out the rest of the season, basically using a redshirt year over a report that he basically was promised some things NIL-wise, and the promises were not kept, and so he's sitting out. Now, there's been follow-up reporting on this. I saw that he was actually maybe approached for more money to transfer somewhere else after hearing wins over Kansas and Houston, and that his family hired an agent to seek more money because his, quote, market value changed. Now, I didn't vet that as deeply, so I don't know how true that is, but the idea that he's basically like, I'm sitting out the rest of the year, okay, let me be clear. If he was promised things and those promises weren't kept, I don't blame him for sitting out. Now, it's an unfortunate byproduct of the NIL era that guys can just make these decisions. But yeah, like the NIL is set up where it's like, this is the contract. You're signing some sort of contract, and if it's not being fulfilled, then that player has a right to be like, hey, you're not giving me what I wanted or what I signed up for. So that's not going to happen. Now, if it's the alternative though, and he really is just sitting out because he's now been offered more money somewhere else to transfer, but he can't transfer yet. And so he's trying to protect himself and get the bag, come November, December. That is wrong. And that is where this is going to be the grossness of this whole setup, is that if other players start doing this for that same reason, where they're like, well, hey, this team's promising me a bunch of money at the end of the season, because you want to talk about like promises kept and promises, failed. Like, that could be an empty promise. You could get to December and that team's like, hey, we actually, we have our attention on somebody else now. We're not going to give you what we actually said we were going to give you. So if that's what if he's going on like a hope and a prayer that some team's going to play him more, that's risky on his part, and that's wrong. Like, if you are committed to a program and you sign some sort of NIL contract, like, you got to fulfill it. But I think because here's the other thing. Now we have UNLV running back Michael Allen has joined this same fold where he says he's not playing the rest of the year. He's redshirting. Now, he said his is related to reps and not getting the playing time that he wanted, because he's like the fourth string running back on the team, and not about NIL because he had no NIL deals apparently. But also USC defensive lineman Bear Alexander is, for a playing time reasons, transferring out of USC and doing this exact same thing too. So it's kind of funny that Sluka sort of was the domino to now trigger a bunch of other guys following suit. Like, it only takes one to start a movement, right? That's basically what you saw here. And now you just worry about guys taking advantage of this process and what that means moving forward. Now, I think ultimately what all this means to kind of get us through this first down here, and I want to talk about this more with Nick because I think this is a fascinating development in the NIL era. This feels like we're getting closer and closer to, like, these players are going to have to be employees and they're going to have to sign contracts with teams. Like, it's going to have to be like, you're committing to us for this amount of time, hell or high water, this is what it is. We're not going to risk losing you because you don't think you're getting enough playing time or whatever, because you just don't want to play, so you're going to sit out. Because if this is like Sluka taking advantage of the situation, he's like, oh, well, hey, I got NIL money coming from this school later. That's not going to fly. Like, that can't happen in this sport. And I do wonder too, like, what this looks like to his teammates. The teammates that he's like bailing on with a 3-0 UNLV team, like off to a great start, an amazing start, a torrid start. And he's just bailing on them. Like, that, listen, I understand, like, you got to do what you got to do. But on some level too, like, that's got to look, that there's no way that flies in the locker room. I understand, like, you don't talk about other people's money and they keep all that stuff out of it. But in the same breath, man, like, that seems tough when you're mid-season like that and you're just like, it'd be one thing if you like held out from the beginning. But to do it mid-season when you're 3-0, off to a great start, and your teammates are kind of counting on you, I got to think that you lose some respect among your fellow teammates and brothers there. Second down, we move on as another interesting situation that is developing out of the college football world is this one revolving around the Pac-12 poaching several teams from the Mountain West, and the Mountain West invoking basically a poaching fine to the Pac-12 that basically means every time they take a team from the from the Mountain West, or a poaching penalty is what they're calling it, they have to pay $10 million plus another $1 million for every school they acquire on top of that. And they've already done this with Boise State, Fresno State, San Diego State, Colorado State, Utah State is going, and UNLV, the team we just mentioned, is considering going. And so there's now a figure of over $50 million that they owe. And the Pac-12 is taking them to court saying that they can't enforce this. Another byproduct of the NIL and conference expansion era. I'm curious to see how this sort of shakes out. I love the fact that the Mountain West commissioner, that she basically in Gloria Narvaez, that she sort of invoked this as a way to sort of save the conference and be like, no, you're not doing this to us. But here's the thing. Here's my thing. Like, what's the trickle down effect of this? Our team just going to keep taking from other conferences? Like, where is the cutoff? Is the cutoff when you get, like, at some point, some conference is just going to have to decide, yeah, we got to fold. We can't do this anymore, because there's no way. Like, it's just the The Pac-12 is just taken from a lower level Group 5 conference, and they're just like, we're just going to make these all Pac-12 teams now. So like, when does it end? When does the NCAA step in at some point and just say like, all right, we're just going to do this 4 conferences with all the D1 teams, or like 5 to 6 conferences with all the D1 teams. All the other ones go away, because like it's just going to be this never-ending cycle of poaching teams from other conferences until you get down to the bottom barrel conferences, and then those conferences just cease to exist. But at some point, what are they going to start pulling up? Like, unless I guess unless it just continues, and these lower FBS programs and conferences just then say, we're going to pull from FCS schools and add like North Dakota to our conference. I guess that could happen. But I don't know. Like, logistically, that all just sounds very crazy. I don't know where it ends, but this is yet another byproduct of the era that we're living in. All right, we move on to third down. Third down I wanted to make about Colorado because they got that emotional win over Baylor, which, Hail Mary pass from Shedeur Sanders, and then Travis Hunter forces the fumble on the ensuing overtime drive for them to stop it and seal the win. Travis Hunter, by the way, probably should be considered the favorite or second favorite for the Heisman right now. Dude's been incredible, but people don't want to talk about him because it's Colorado and it's controversial. And that's not fair to him. I'll say that. But they are now 3-1. They still play UCF, KSU, Arizona, home against Cincinnati, at Texas Tech, versus Utah, at Kansas, versus Oklahoma State. I want to know from you guys, do you think Colorado gets the 6 wins? Because they're 3-1 right now, and last year they got to they had the undefeated start to the year, and then it all collapsed from there. I think they won one more game, or did they win one more game the rest of the year last year? UCF, not the team it used to be. Like it's crazy that on the back of 2 players, they're in a position where I think they really could get a bowl game. But like, I don't know, like their schedules, to me, their schedule looks like they could find 3 more wins in there. I don't know that I'm like worried about Arizona for them. Although, I don't know. Let me look something up real quick. I want to see this. I don't think they play any more. They play Kansas State is ranked, so we know them. That's the only one though, I think. Cincinnati's not, Texas Tech is not. And that's obviously right now. This could change. Utah is not. Or no, is Utah? Utah is ranked. Utah's 10. I forgot about Utah. Sorry, Utah. I forgot about you for a second there. That's not fair to the Utah fans out there. Kansas is not ranked. Oklahoma State is ranked. They're 20th. They dropped 6 spots after their loss this past weekend to who'd they lose to? Oregon. But yeah, so they still play a couple ranked teams. But the other ones in there, like UCF, Arizona, Cincinnati, Texas Tech, and Kansas. Those all feel like games that 2 people really could win for you. I'm just being honest. I mean, I'm just being dead on. Kansas just lost to UNLV with a quarterback that's completing 43% of his passes. So I'm going to go ahead and say I think Colorado gets the 6 wins. Maybe I'm being too optimistic. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit. I know everyone hates Colorado right now. I'm not even the biggest fan of Dion right now, but I'm not using that against the program itself. I think it'd be a cool story if they get to 6 wins, and I hope they get to a bowl game. What happens after that is anybody's guess, but I think Dion could be out of there. And then 4th down. I want to know from you guys, and I'll give you my answer to get us out of here. Team that you're most worried about if Ohio State had to face them today. And I'm talking like all across college football. Is it Georgia? Is it Oregon, who's coming up in a couple weeks? I would guess most people would say no, because Oregon's had some offensive line issues of their own. I think the answer for me, has to be Texas, because they've proven the most to this point, and that's why they're number 1 in the country. But I'm going to be honest, man, like Tennessee is out there lurking, and they make me nervous as hell. I would not want to face that Tennessee team in the playoff right now. Their defense is really good. Their offense is like, they finally have an offense to go along with their defense. Scary, scary proposition. The idea that Tennessee can make the playoff and actually have their shit together for once and have a solid all-around team. All right, that's going to do it for Sons of the Shoe. Let me know at Spencito_ or in the comment section at the 92 to the Fan YouTube channel which team you'd be the most worried about if Ohio State had to face them this coming weekend across college football. Appreciate you guys as always. We'll be back, Nick and I, with a post-game edition of this very podcast and show. after the Michigan State game on Saturday. It's a 7:30 kick, so it'll be a late show, but we'll be there to talk about it with you. Until then, have a great week, or a great rest of your week. We'll talk to you guys soon, and as always, go Bucks.